Toys R Us completely botched a billion-dollar toy empire. With their final store closing in 2021, the company suffered the consequences of bad planning, bad legal moves, and even worse business deals. For any kid born in the 80s or 90s, this situation is almost unimaginable. Toys R Us were in virtually every city in America, and everybody had one iconic jingle stuck in their head. Even your mom knew how it went.
I don't want to grow up, I'm a Toys R Us kid. They got a million toys at Toys R Us that I can play with.
It was an American business gone right, until it went so horribly wrong. To understand how a $12 billion company collapsed, it's important to understand the man who started it all, Charles Lazarus. He was born in 1923 to Jewish immigrants in Washington, D.C. After serving in World War II as a cartographer, he got to work helping his parents out in their bike shop. Lazarus noticed by the mid-1940s that all his wartime pals were getting married and having children. Lots and lots of children. This was the baby boom generation. He saw that the national birth rate was also skyrocketing, which meant an immense entrepreneurial opportunity. Young Lazarus capitalized on this trend and began selling baby furniture at the family bike shop, mainly cribs and cradles. He started out small with just a handful of items for sale, but business quickly proved profitable. With the help of an uncle already in the furniture business, Lazarus soon took over the entire family storefront. In 1948, Lazarus made the decision to expand, opening his own store at a new location under a new name, Children's Bargain Town. This expanded shop also sold kid-focused products like strollers, but quickly Lazarus noticed a major threat to his business. Families were often only buying one item and not coming back for more. His furniture was built to last, and families held on to it for every new kid. The only item he was selling consistently on a recurring basis? Toys. Lazarus saw that parents frequently visited his store to purchase the latest toys and stuffed animals, because their kids quickly lost interest in the old ones, and each new kid had to have their own new toys. Here, Lazarus saw dollar signs. He had the idea of creating something completely new, completely unseen, a big box store dedicated solely to the sale of toys. In 1957, he made his dream a reality when he opened the first ever Toys R Us in Rockville, Maryland. He had devised the logo himself, placing the R backwards as if a child had drawn it. This was the birth of a retail giant. It was a smash hit, thanks to the overwhelming range and quality of toys offered by the supermarket-style store. The expansive nature of Toys R Us hadn't yet been seen in toy retail, as the norm at the time was small boutique storefronts. Lazarus' new shop, meanwhile, offered an innovative toy utopia, allowing for the first location to become an immediate success. His timing was perfect. The toy business in the 1960s exploded with iconic items such as Barbie, Mr. Potato Head, the Easy Bake Oven, and more. At the same time, Japan, fighting hard to revitalize its war-torn economy, began producing cheap toys like tin robots and cars and stuffed animals. Lazarus, with his big box style store, was uniquely positioned to buy these cheap toys in bulk for an even cheaper price. Soon, boutique mom-and-pop shops just couldn't compete with Toys R Us anymore. Lazarus had undercut their deals with manufacturers by buying in volume, which meant higher and higher profits for his company. And his large stores created a year-round demand for toys that even big department stores couldn't compete with. By the late 1960s, Toys R Us strategy was so cutthroat and so effective that they were becoming the first recorded category killer, a kind of mass-market retailer that specializes in a specific category of goods. These companies' large buying power allows them to take advantage over smaller retailers and dominate their industry. Later examples include Best Buy, PetSmart, and Barnes & Noble. As Toys R Us began rapidly expanding locations, Charles Lazarus and Toys R Us were creating a savage business plan, paving the way for other category killers, and decimating the mom-and-pop shops in each new town they expanded into. As the 1960s turned into the 1970s, Toys R Us began expanding its reach through a newer medium: television. Lazarus came up with a design for their mascot, a friendly giraffe named Jeff, and soon this friendly creature was in all their ads. Toys R Us experienced some of their most rapid growth during the 1970s, thanks to the power of advertising through children's programs. Previously, toy retailers had been forced to advertise mainly to parents, but now Toys R Us could directly target kids with their attention-grabbing ads. While this advertising elevated their brand, as well as sales, it was taken to the next level with their 1980s oh-so-catchy jingle. The song and slogan turned the captivated children into loyal customers and became a part of wider American culture. This new form of advertising, combined with the new category-killer business plan, was successful beyond Lazarus' wildest dreams. In 1950, the toy industry was worth $500 million, and by Toys R Us heyday in the 1990s, the company was worth $12 billion. They had nearly 15,000 locations and sold over 18,000 types of toys. In the mid-1990s, Toys R Us controlled a whopping 25% of the toy market. It was the golden age of Toys R Us. Every kid in your neighborhood had the latest Furby, Tamagotchi, Beanie Baby, Game Boy, Etch-a-Sketch, Koosh Ball, Barbie doll, Stretch Armstrong, Tickle Me Elmo, Super Soaker, and they had all probably got them from Toys R Us. Everyone, it seemed, wanted to be a Toys R Us kid forever. That is, until their downfall began.
Well, Trevor, I think what happened with Toys R Us, honestly, it shouldn't surprise investors. Toys R Us didn't keep up with the times. It's right there in the slogan, I don't want to grow up. Well, you should have.
By the late 1990s, their profits started to fall for one clear reason. They cut back on the amount of toys they were selling. In the era of globalization, low inflation, and economic optimism, they had increased pressure to become uber profitable. That meant cutting costs and, importantly, cutting down on the number of toys offered in store, which is what had made them special in the first place. But it wasn't a company-ending change. However, when Charles Lazarus stepped down as CEO in 1994, the company spiraled and lost its innovative spirit. At the same time, fierce new competition entered the market: Walmart. This big box everything retailer began selling toys as well, and people didn't seem to mind mixing groceries, toys, and clothes all in the same basket. In fact, they found it convenient. In 1998, Lazarus finally left the company for good, and Walmart officially surpassed Toys R Us as the largest market share in the toy industry. And this became the least of their struggles. The company was accused of serial mismanagement. Right when they needed it most, there was no consequential effort to reimagine themselves. Competition in the market changed significantly with the introduction of the internet and more sophisticated video games. Kids began to spend less time playing with physical toys and more time online with video games. As a result of these changes, by the early 2000s, Toys R Us was bleeding money. Internet sales were growing as physical retail was hurting, and Toys R Us faced the consequences of not properly innovating. Consumers began to do shopping online with the new Walmart-like competitor, Amazon. In their panic, Toys R Us forged a deal with Amazon for a one-of-a-kind 10-year partnership. Toys R Us paid Amazon $50 million a year plus a percentage of sales to be Amazon's exclusive seller of toys and baby products. This was disastrous for Toys R Us and a bad sign for their future. Not only did they not develop any online infrastructure themselves, they instead paid another company millions of dollars to do it for them. Predictably, to anybody with an understanding of the internet, the deal did lead to a temporary increase in sales, but later stuck them in the pre-digital dark age. During these years, if you tried to go to toysrus.com, you would be rerouted to Amazon. They were losing their identity as a brand and instead giving it to their competitor. And from the deal, Amazon learned how to market toys. They learned how profitable they could be and began to develop their own toy lines and partnerships. This was one of the worst business deals of the dot-com era. Toys R Us quickly realized how much they had screwed themselves. In 2004, they sued Amazon for breach of contract, and they won. Amazon was forced to pay them back the $50 million investment and a bit more, but by this time, it was too late. Toys R Us was dead in the water as it had lost years on developing its own online presence. After that, Toys R Us failed to create compelling reasons for customers to visit. Amazon's lack of a storefront and mass-produced model meant that they outcompeted them on price and selection. Now, the warehouse style of Toys R Us looked sad in comparison. Other companies did adapt during this time. Best Buy price-matched Amazon and created a showroom-style floor plan, realizing that customers liked to see, touch, and feel the electronics. Even a company like Build-A-Bear was able to survive the switch to a digital landscape, expanding out from just malls and including online elements in their stuffed animal products. Bottom line, Toys R Us was still trying to win on convenience and price, but compared to the Amazons, Targets, and Walmarts of the world, it wasn't so convenient, and its prices weren't great. They had taken on a crushing debt each year, hoping the holiday season would put them in the black, just like the old toy stores they had driven out of business in the past. They had also taken on what was becoming less and less valuable real estate. As the years progressed into the 2010s, smaller footprints with a more personalized feel were coming back into style, and even Target and Walmart began experimenting with less square footage. By the mid-2010s, even hedge funds were reluctant to buy this over-bloated, dead fish of a company, as appealing as their now nostalgic brand and jingle were. Add to this the sad fact that toy sales in general were declining. Kids just didn't want to play with dolls or toy cars as much when they could be playing mobile games on their phones like Angry Birds. Independent toy stores had been closing for years, and Toys R Us, as the one-time category killer, now found itself the last man standing. But it was barely alive. There were a couple of failed attempts to revitalize the company by hedge funds and business groups, but the company just kept losing money. It couldn't compete with Amazon and Walmart because it just couldn't change drastically enough. In 2017, Toys R Us filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. When the global events of 2020 drew people online even more so than they had been in the past, the hopes of Toys R Us ever making a comeback were becoming painfully slim. In 2021, the last Toys R Us store closed for good. Lazarus had changed the way companies did business, virtually inventing the category killer business model and creating a globe-spanning $12 billion toy empire. But his company sadly stopped innovating and was simply outcompeted by smarter competition. Which is tragic, because deep down, many of us would still like to believe that we are Toys R Us kids. We would like nothing more than to break out our old toys and relive our youth. But the times have changed, and that dream is over, in part because of the brutal collapse of Toys R Us.